Hello guys and girls, and welcome to this week's game dev tutorial. I thought I'd show you guys how to make a low poly cell shaded rock within Unity using Cinema 4D. So without further ado, let's just jump into this. First thing we want to do is make the rock 1 unit in Unity. Cinema 4D does everything in centimeters, but 100 centimeters is 1 Unity unit. So we'll make this cube 100 and we'll press shift and drag it down if it wants to work. Yep, there we go. And this will be our floor. To make the rock, we are going to use a sphere. This sphere is too big, so if we shrink it down to 50, that will make the radius 100. So we want it a bit smaller than the rock. So if we take it at 40, this is the basis for our rock. So if you press N and B, you'll bring up the line shader to show you how many polys are going to be in the rock. What we need to do is go onto the sphere and turn the segments down to 12. So now the segments down to 12, we've got this nice low poly look. So we've got this low poly rock. So now we want to take it and turn it into a hexagon. So here we go. This just means it takes it from having the triangle top to everything square. So it's kind of like a filleted cube. And this is the basis for our rock. What we need to do now is if you click the middle mouse button, you can go into the different views. We go into side view. If we make the sphere here and click up here and make it editable and go into the point mode, we can see the points. So with all of these points, we can get rid of the bottom. So now the rock is sitting perfectly on the cube. After this, I will go in here and turn the floor off for a second. And I just want to fill this cube. So if I press M and then D, I will come into fill mode. So M and D on the list is close polygon hole. We can come to the bottom and close the bottom hole. Now, as you see, we've got lots of n-gons going on. So we can press M and then K to get the knife tool. And we can just draw the fillets, the holes, the polygons that we need. So this is just cutting along the bottom of the polygon and making one big polygon. And now we can put a central one. So we have no n-gons going on and we have a nice bottom to our rock. Next thing I want to do is go into loop select tool, press U and then L. We can take this and go into loop select tool and select this bottom loop and then press M and S to go into the bevel tool. And we can just bevel the edge. I would say if we look over here in the bottom, 5 centimeters, a nice simple bevel. And I will subdivide it by 1 just to give it that nice round look. So now if I put the floor back on, you can see the rock sort of has a nice rounded edge. Now here is the fun part. You can start shaping the rock. So if we go into the sphere and double click it and rename it rock and go into the scale tool, we can go into scale tool and we want to go back into model mode so we can see the whole model. As you see, the axis is on the floor. So if I scale it up, it's going to scale it from the floor and make it bigger. So I want to make a rock about 80 centimeters high. So get it about there, 80 centimeters, make it a little bit smaller, and then I will scale it up to fit the floor a bit better. So now we have something that fits the floor, and there's your rock. Only joking. So here's the fun part. What we can do now is start shaping the rock using a displacer. So if we bring a displacer in and drag this displacer to be a child of the rock, we can click on the displacer and we have the settings down here. How you use a displacer is you need to come into the shading tab, click on this little arrow here where it says shader, and you can pick different types of shading. For this, we want to use a noise shader because noise kind of represents, it's very good at representing sort of wind and stuff like that. So it sort of gives you that natural look to the rock. So if we come here and select noise, we start getting this quite funky. It looks quite good as it is now. So there's a simple sort of really low poly rock if you wanted to. At the moment, the poly count on this rock is only 92 polygons. So it's pretty low poly. But what we're going to do is come back into model mode and look at the shader settings. So once you've picked your noise shader, you can come down here in the samples, click on the samples. This is your noise that you're using. You can change the different types of noise. There's loads of different things, but for me, noise is perfect. Just the standard gradient noise here works really well. With this, you can start playing with the global scale. This will change the scale of the displacer on the rock, so we'll just give you a different outcome, more bubbles, more rocks. So as you see, it's looking quite rock-like. This, it looks pretty cool. And we can come down to the cycles, which is how many times it's going to run the displacer on the rock. So we can bring this up to about 1. As you see, it starts making the rock bigger as it's running the displacer more, and we can start playing around with the scale. Once you get something you like, you get this quite nice rock shape. It's going a bit big. We can scale it down after though. So I'm going to take the cycles up to about 1.3. So we're getting this really nice rock shape here. It's looking quite horrendous at the moment, but there's one more thing we're going to do with this, and that's take it into a subdivision surface. So now we have this, we can come in and click the subdivision surface up here. But what you can do is if you click on the rock, so you got the rock selected, hold Alt and then click subdivision surface, it will pull it directly onto the rock. So as you see now, this has gone quite high poly. So come into the subdivision surface and take it down to only 1 subdivision. We don't want to make it a massive subdivision. And as you see, we're getting this nice rock shape, nice and smooth. The reason why we want it so smooth is because when we bring it into Unity, we'll be using a Toon Shader or a cell shader, which works better with more rounded objects than hard edged objects. So if I turn the subdivision off, you see this is quite hard shaded. So over at the top here, you're just going to get really hard shading, and it's not going to use the Toon Shader very well. So with the subdivision surface, yeah, it does put more polygons in, but with a minimum of this sort of polygon count, this is going to be about 300-400 polys just for one little rock like this, which isn't loads. Most devices can handle that. You're going to get this nice shading, and you'll see when we import it into Unity. So now we've got the subdivision surface. What you can do is come back into the shader settings and have a look at what these settings do again. I'm just playing with the global scale, so we can puff it out a bit more with the global scale to give it a bit more rock-like. Maybe come down and reduce the cycles a little bit to get a more, see, that's just giving us quite a egg-shaped rock, quite a smooth rock. Depends how smooth you want it. You might want it a bit more than that, so I will take this. I quite like the look of this. It's looking a bit too sharp though, so bring it down a little bit more. Still a little bit too sharp, so just bring the cycles down and maybe bring the scale up a little bit, so we're getting this nice indents in there. So we get a little indent in there, indent in there. What I'm looking for with these indents is, I know that when the Toon Shader hits them, you'll get these nice little shadows and light spots, specular, that I have built into my Toon Shader. Plus as well, we're looking at the bottom. We want the bottom not to be too flat and sitting on the rocks. So I'm quite happy with that. What you can do with this is keep it as one of your rock prefabs and save this file, because you can come in here and select children and then right click it again, and you can come down and save current state to object. So if we save current state to object, this subdivision surface now, turn this off, this is the actual rock that we've just made. And the reason why I keep top one here is because we can take this rock now and drag it to the side. So we've got one rock here. This is not finished yet, but this is just to show you what you can do. And you can come in here with the subdivision surface one again, turn it on, come into your displacer, and you can just, with these settings, you can just make another rock by coming to the seed, turn the seed up one, and then now you just have a slightly different variant of it. And you can just go through this seed number and it will give you loads of different rocks. So if you need to make loads of rocks for your game really fast and you don't want them all to be exactly the same, you can just click the seed number and look, we get loads of different rocks now. So they look very similar, but they will show up differently in the shader, and they will just give you that little bit natural variance to each rock. And you know for a fact every rock will be exactly the same poly count as the last one because it's the same object. nice and simple. So I've got the subdivision surface done now. For this tutorial, I'm just going to delete that. So we're just going to come here, this subdivision surface, which is our rock, with double click, and we can name it rock. I'm going to name it rock 3 because I've already got 2 other rocks in the game. Drag it back on, and the size is a little bit too big, I would say. I just want it a bit smaller. So there, and then maybe drag it down from the top. I just want it about 80 centimeters high, so my character is hidden behind it a little bit. Okay, so if we come into the rock now, we can come and use the loop select tool, U and then L, and select just this bottom circle here. Now we've got the bottom circle, come back up here and go into the live selection, hold shift and select all of these bottom points. So once we got all of these bottom points selected, that's it. So this is the bottom of our rock. We want this to sit flush to the floor. And there's a very simple way of doing this, is if you take your rock in object mode and come to the side view, so middle click on your mouse wheel, you can see the rock's quite high. So we want it to sort of, I would say, sit like this on the floor. So that's sitting on the floor nice and evenly, sitting on this rock here. We can come back into this selection mode, turn the floor off, come back into point mode, and now we've got all the bottoms selected. Press M and U, and this will affect all of the points selected. So on the y-axis we want to set it to 0, but we want the coordinates to be the world position. So now it's in the world position, we can press apply, and you see we've got this nice hard edge rock bottom. That's why we put the bottom on the rock earlier, so it just gives you that nice hard edge, so when it's sitting on the floor, it's not, it will look more like a rock. So we're pretty much nearly finished. The only step to do now is we can just smooth the rock a little bit, where you can see some of these hard edges. Like this is a little bit too hard down here, it's not going to work well with the shader. Under here is a little bit too hard, even though in the game I'm going to be using it a top down and it's not going to matter that much. If you're using it in a game where it's third person or first person, you might get a bit of trouble and you will see these polygons. So an easy way to do this is we can turn the floor off now, and we need to go from layout mode, from startup, and we can go into sculpt mode. So in sculpt mode we can sculpt the rock like you're sculpting in ZBrush or something like that. So I just use the smooth tool. If you click the smooth tool, come down to size and pressure. The size is okay, but the pressure we just want about 3%. We don't want too much pressure, and we just want to click slowly over these parts here. So as you see, this will just smooth the rock out a little bit. We don't want to smooth it too much. We just want to smooth it a little bit, just so we don't get these, you can see the hard edge in the shader. Zelda looking Buddha. The one thing I will do now is I'm looking at the poly count. We have it at 368 polys. What we can do is we're probably not going to need, even though it's a very low poly rock, we're probably not going to need a lot of these polygons. So what we can do is come here, see these are quite tight here. Let's see what it would look like if we press UL and just select around. We can select all this and press M and then N, and it will remove. So that's removed that bottom, and as I'm using it from top down, that's not really going to affect it too much. So that's got rid of a few polygons. I can select this middle one now and see what this does, MN. So we're getting quite a smooth look there. So I would say that's pretty much it. Now we've just got a 300 poly rock. So that's pretty much it for the rock. I'm quite happy with that. We'll put the floor back on to see what it looks like up against the floor. My game is going to be a top down, so always make sure you're looking at it from the way your game is going to be looking at it. And I'm quite liking the look of that boulder. We've got some nice dents in there, some nice pivots, nice little things like that. And what you can do if you wanted is come come back into a sphere, make a sphere about 6 strong, make it square. So we get these nice little thingies, nice little rocks. And they're very low poly, not going to take up much time, and you can just make them nice and small. And if you just want a little bit of natural debris around, you can just scale them down like this, and you've got some little rocks around it as well, which is nice and simple, but we won't do this for that tutorial. We'll just get rid of it with our 300 polygon rock. One last thing to remember is we need to create material for it. We can call this rock mat. Nice and simple, drag it on here. I do have a texture that I can use. We don't want reflectance on in here, it won't make a difference in Unity, but it will just make things look a bit better. And I will use one of my textures that I've pre-made, and we've got a light grey rock or a mid-grey rock, so I'll go for mid-grey rock for this one. Yes, I'll move it into the destination. So this is just a simple texture. Doesn't look particularly brilliant up close. It's okay, it's got a little bit of rock texture to it, but in game with my cell shader, I know it looks good. So we're going to be seeing stuff probably from about that distance. Just gives you that little bit of rock detail, and plus we're also going to have toon shading on it, which is going to give you that banded shading and banded specular. So that's it for the rock. We can get rid of the floor, come back to the rock now. It's sitting perfectly on the floor in the 0 axis, but what we need to look for now is if we come to object mode, we can see that its access point is not actually to the floor. So we can come over here and select the access enable, and this will just move the access, so we can reset that to 0 and turn it off. So now the access of the rock is on the floor, and when we move it, we can just move it left and right, and it's not going to matter. And when we drag it into Unity, it will pin itself to the floor. So that is the rock created. Okay, so before we jump over into Unity, I will just export it, and I'll show you how to export it. And what you need to export is we can go File, Export, and we just come here to FBX. We just want it as an FBX file. And on my desktop, I've got a rocks folder. As you see, I've got rock 1, rock 2, and this is rock 3. So I can just call this one rock 3 and press save. In the settings, we don't need no animation data. We don't want the selection only. You can select selection only if you still had the other prefab in here, or the other instance where you was making seeded versions of the rock, like selection only. But we want normals, and we can take the texture and material as well, just so it embeds it into the data for later. Even though I've already got them in Unity, it sometimes helps for if you're bringing this into another project, at least you know you've got the texture there as well. So we can press OK. And now that is the file bounced out, and we'll jump over to Unity and I'll show you the shader. Okay, so here we are in Unity, and this is the current game I'm working on called Patient Zero. It's a roguelike in the esque of Binding of Isaac, something like that. And let's crack on with this rock tutorial. So we need to import the asset. So if I come to Game Assets, I have a folder. Nope, not Rooms. We want to go to Rocks, and I have Rock 1 here, and I can just create a new folder and call it Rock 2, and this will be where all the rock data will be stored. So what I normally do is create a folder called rock art, and then create a second folder called rock prefab, and this will be the prefab of the rock. Nice and simple. So in the rock art folder, I will come here, right click and press import new asset, and I will import the rock from my desktop. Where's my rock folder? Rock folder, rock 3 is the one we want. So in here we have imported it. We got some errors saying they don't allow Cinema 4D imports, but even though I bounced it as FBX, this error still comes up. So hopefully Unity fixes that soon. And this is the rock asset. So we want to come in here. First thing I always do with my items is the read write enabled. I always turn that on because I tend to use meshes for particle systems, and the read write needs to be on. Plus some other things like outlines, you need to have the read write enabled for the code to be able to act on it. So we put read write on. We're okay with the rest of this stuff. As you see down here, it's just got the standard shader. Looks okay. You can see that the what I was saying about the Phong layer in Unity, the smoothing's a bit better, and that works a little bit more like having the Phong angle limit set to infinite. So there you go, there's your rock really. We can come here and go in materials. So we want to extract the material into this folder. So we'll get a rock map material. And we want to come to extract textures. So we can select this folder as well. And that will extract the mid-grey rock texture. If you've already imported, like I have already, I'm just doing this to show you. I tend to have a big folder full of textures that I will just use as reference, and I won't extract the texture normally. I'll just have it saved on the file just for other games or other uses where I might need it. So if I come into the rock texture, I can change the shader, and the shader is a Toon Shader from Shader Graphs. I will leave a link in the description to the tutorial videos of how to make these shaders, but I will show you the shader in a minute. And if you want to copy it, I will leave a link to the HLS file, light file down below in the description that you can download and recreate these shaders for yourself. So we come in here to the Toon Shader. In this Toon Shader, I have Specular and I have the one banding of shadows, a bit like the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. And we can just drag in this texture, and you can see down here, this is what the shader looks like. So it gives you that nice cartoony. We have the specular and we have the shadow. I can turn the specular off if I want to. That's just a little bit of code within the shader that allows you to do that. And you also have control whether you want it to be a hard edge shadow, so you can turn it from hard edge to soft edge. So giving it a little bit of a soft edge gives it that more 3D look. Hard edge gives it a more of a cartoony look. Specular amount you can turn down if you want the specular off. Turn it all the way up to turn it off, and the specular amount is just specular blurriness is just to how blurry you want the specular light to be on your item. And that's pretty much it. So now we've got the model, read write enabled. That's all we need to drag it into the game. As you see, that one rock has turned into 4 different rocks. Just down to angles depending on how it is in your game. Because my game is all set at this 50-degree angle, you can use this rock 4 times in 4 different angles and you will get 4 different outcomes. So we have these, and if we come back into the shader while looking at it in the game view, we can play around with the shadow blurriness. So if you want to give it a bit more of a 3D look and give it more shadow, we can. So this is looking kind of cool. I like the little divots it's creating. Maybe take the shadow blurriness so we get that nice toon look, just a tiny little bit. The specular amount I quite like. Set just a little bit like this. Nice and simple. Zoom it in, see what it looks like really zoomed in. So you're getting quite hard edges. And go to the game window and press maximize on play. And we can have a little look into the game and see what they look like while the game's running. So there you go. 1 rock has turned into 4 rocks. Okay, so as I said, I will take you for a little walk through the shader. It's very simple. It's taking a get main light calculation, which is coming from, all right, let's go small screen again, which is coming from these custom nodes I've created. So we can calculate all different lighting. All of these custom nodes are running off of a custom lighting script that I didn't create, but you can find it online. I'll leave a link in the description. And once you get this custom lighting file and create all of these custom nodes, you can use them throughout your shaders. And that's what's happening in the Toon Shader. So I've opened up the Toon Shader. These are the custom nodes. So this is a really simple, it looks simple, custom function for lighting, but all it's doing is referencing the source is the custom lighting code that was created by, I can't remember the name, I'll leave it in the description down below. Same with the specular, is a custom lighting node here, which is just reading specular from this custom piece of code down here. And then the Toon Shader is literally using the get main light and calculating the light and the shadows. I'm using a smooth step, which is creating that hard line between the shadow and the material. We're also using Specular, the custom Specular node with we've got a Specular color. These are standard parameters for your specular amount and blurriness. Coming down here, I'm using a keyword. This keyword is specular on and off. So this is a keyword node that is literally turning it on and off, turns the specular color from white, which means it's fully, the specular is fully on, or black, which means it's completely transparent and you can't see any specular, so that turns it on and off. So in the game, you can just see here, I can select the character, select him, and if I turn the specular on and off, it just puts that hard shaded specular onto the character's body, and you can do this on any material you want within this shader. Back to the Toon Shader, it's literally just taken in a material. So we have a Toon Shader with a material here. So this is the tiling, so if you need to tile the material you can. We've just got a main texture node into a sample 2D texture, and it's also adding a color here, and this color is used for a flash. So I've got it set to a parameter called flash, so if I put this to 1, you can see that it completely whites out the character. So within code, I can just use this flash module or this flash node to make the character flash, which I can show you in game. So if I come and run the game, let's move the shaders out the way so you can see. If I run the game, you ain't gonna see anything, but if I come in here, enemies should spawn, and when I hit them, you can see the flash happening. So the bodies flash. When they grow all big, they're invulnerable, so you can't hit them and they won't flash. So you know when you're hitting something, it will give you that little flash, and that's just used by easing the flash of easing the float value from 0.2 to 0 over like 2 seconds. Really simple within code. Every time you hit it, it just sparks it on and off, on and off, on and off. Nice and simple. And that's pretty much it for the shader. So if I get big screen again, I will go slowly over it. So if you want to copy any of this, you can. Feel free to. You have like I said, I will try and leave a link, or I'll try and get some of these put into a folder and save so you can download them and try them yourself. I can't guarantee they will work because sometimes you do get ID errors when importing certain shaders into certain projects. I'm not sure if Unity's fixed that yet. If they have, then you're more than welcome to use these. I will leave it in the description, and that's my tutorial on how to create a low poly toon rock within Unity and how to get that Zelda Wind Waker shader. I'll see you next time. Make sure you comment down below and let me know what you'd like to see next in this tutorial. And for now, that's it. Bye.